Welcome back to those who are have been joined us for the last panel, and welcome for those who are just joining us. I'm so excited about this panel. I wanted to just invite Chandra Caldwell, one of our students in African American Studies, is going to introduce the panel and tell us a little bit about what we can expect today. Thank you so much, everyone.
Hi, everyone. I'm Chandra Caldwell. I'm a full-time student at Cal State Fullerton. I'm also a full-time parent, and I can say that being a parent and a student has been both challenging and rewarding, especially during this time. I would say, like, the Zoom with the noise and sometimes the internet not working, not being able to help be hands-on with them because I'm so like focused in my work, but also being able to navigate the positive is like being able to navigate the college system because it's my first time, and I'd be able to help them navigate and push them, and just showing them how to like advocate for themselves, ask for help when they need it with their teachers, extra time, being a little more assertive and things like that. So that's the rewarding part about it. I'm gonna introduce Julie, Julie Barber. It says, Julie Barber is a proud CSUF alumni. As a licensed marriage and family therapist for over 18 years, Ms. Barber continues to support families during some of their most vulnerable times. In her work with the Southern California Drug and Alcohol Program, Julie provided effective treatment for women in recovery and developed the Families Recovery Program. She also partnered with the Long Beach Police Department to provide parenting classes, family and individual therapy for community members, referred to the Youth Service Division of the LBPD. In addition to running a thriving private practice, Ms. Barber works at psychological counseling services at Chapman University. She provides individual and family therapy and consults with staff and faculty on providing effective supportive counseling services for students studying on campus on Chapman's Healthcare Service Science Campus. And the next person I'm going to introduce, it says, recognized as a 2018 inspirational parent and as a 2017 Black feminist, rising, Trina Greeny Brown is a leader on the rise, and she's taking Black parents and children along with her to higher heights. In 2016, she founded Parenting for Liberation for parents of Black children to envision a world where our children are free to be their most liberated selves. She is a proud Black feminist, mama activist of two, and is the author of Parenting for Liberation, a guide for raising Black children, published June 2020 by Feminist Press. Our other presenter is J.P. Howard. It says is an educator, literate. Oh my God, I'm making up. Literary activist, co-create. I'm sorry, I'm getting nervous. And recently appointed judge. Her poetry collection, Say Mirror, The opening system was a Lam- Lambda literary finalist. She is also the author of Blur Your Love poems here. Um, Belladonna, a co-editor of Sinister Wisdom, journalists, Black lesbians. We are, we are, we are the revolution. JP was a featured author in Lambda Literaries, LGBTQ writers in schools programs, and has received fellowships from Cave Canon, um, Vana, and Lambda Literary. She um, cultivates women writers in Bloom poetry salons. Her poetry is widely anthropologized. JP is a general poetry editor for Women's Studies um, Quarterly and editor at large of Mom Egg Review. And that's all I have for the list.
Thank you so much, Chandra. Now we're going to start with Julie and just go in the order that Chandra read the bios. Thank you so much, everyone.
I just want to say thank you so much for having me here. I feel so honored to be on this panel and with such distinguished panelists. I'm just going to jump right into it because I don't have a lot of time. I believe I have 15 minutes and I want to, there's so much to say. I don't think 15 minutes is enough for all that I feel inside about this topic, but I'm going to do my best to give it justice. I want to share my screen if that's okay with everyone, if I can find my presentation. I created this little PowerPoint, and I wanted to just talk a little bit about how I see um, the topic. And if I could find it here, let's see, get back. You know, we've been Zooming for a little over a year now. I should be better at this, but here we go. So I was asked to talk about the centering power of peace and parenting. And it's just, like I said, 15 minutes is just not enough to share all that I feel about the importance of approaching parenting with peace, especially in the time that we're living in as parents, parenting, little people of color. I think it's so important to approach it with peace, with all of the distraction and all of the noise. Um, I like to begin by just encouraging you to think about what are your motivations for wanting that peace in parenting. What drives you? As a therapist, I know that motivation is key to change, to sustaining change, to pushing through challenging times. What's your motivation? And I just wanted to share what mine is. And these are my two beautiful daughters. Uh, Courtney, who is an 18-year-old college freshman. Her plans to go to Howard were derailed by COVID. And I'm really, it was bittersweet because she decided not to go to DC for school, partly because of the COVID situation. So it meant that I get to keep her for another year or two, hopefully. I'm so excited about that. And then Kelsey in the sunglasses is a 17-year-old high school junior, and she's currently developing her plans to leave California and study out of state, which is fine with me. But are my motivations for like being a parent and the kind of woman that I want them to grow up to be. What's your motivation? What is driving you? What is driving you to click on this this presentation today? What are you hoping to do as a parent, be as a parent? Keeping that in mind, and then working towards that. My idea of helping parents and in myself is to parent keeping the end in mind. What do I want for my girls? What do I want them to be like? What kind of world do I want them to inherit? And am I a part of that change for them? And my work as a therapist, I believe this is true. What we think about matters. And I think in the previous panel, I think it was Jay Love who talked a little bit about this in the part that I caught, which I thought, well, that is so true. The thoughts that we hold in our head matters so much. They shape how we feel, they shape what we do. And sometimes we don't give a lot of thought to what we're thinking about, what we're holding space in our head for. And I think that's something I really want to encourage and be reflective about for us on this on this Zoom, and as I go forth as a parent myself. Um, this is a little drawing that I draw frequently with my clients, and I think it's so good at illustrating like just some of the ways our thoughts work. We all have these automatic thoughts at the top of the tree, thoughts that we don't like give any kind of attention to. There's a recent study that showed that we have at least 6,000 thoughts per day. I mean, that's a lot just to be clicking through, and the automatic thoughts. It's warm outside, the sun is shining, the mail just got dropped off. I mean, we're just always thinking. But those thoughts that stick around have support in that trunk of the tree, those underlining assumptions. You know, what do we think about ourselves? What do we think about the world around us? What are some of those underlining assumptions that we hold? That takes those automatic thoughts and they anchor them in that, those assumptions that we hold. And even further down the root of that tree is called the schema. And that's in psychology, we talk about core beliefs. We talk about those roots that kind of ground us. And schema center around these negative thoughts that we hold on to about ourselves, about the world around us. They have roots in our history. They have roots in our everyday experience. You know, it's not just what we experience, but how we interpret that experience, what we think about that experience that can really serve to shape us individually and as a people, as African Americans, people of color, women. Like, what are some of those schemas that kind of come up for us? And I just listed a few that I see so often in my practice. And then I can see myself in some of these. I can see my kids also. This idea that we're going to be abandoned. Somehow, you know, the people here are going to not be people we can depend on. And if you think about that in our roots as people, like families separated through, you know, like slavery and the slave trade, or migration, moving from one area of the country to another for better opportunity, that sense of abandonment, that we're gonna not have each other, or that mistrust, like it's not safe to trust the world around us. It's not safe that even though if you're working hard and living the American dream, can you trust that that is going to be for you? Emotional deprivation, like there are only some emotions that are appropriate. You know, you don't want to slip into being the angry Black woman. You can't express your anger, your frustration. Or for kids that, you know, show me your happy face. You can only be happy. um, Somehow something's wrong with you. You're defective. There's something wrong, and you should feel ashamed of that. Isolation. What is it like when you're the only person of color in your classroom, on your street, in your neighborhood? Something wrong with you. Dependence. Like you somehow you in and of yourself isn't enough, isn't good enough. And you know, the idea of interdependence, that you go as far as you can and then you ask for help is okay. Or failure, this fear of not being enough, not not achieving your goals. Or subjugation, that what you want and what your needs are don't matter. All of these are just a representation of those schemas that we can deal with throughout our life, and for lots of different reasons. And sometimes as parents, um, we can not have the maybe the thought that this is what's going on for our children, because sometimes we don't even see it in ourselves. It can become just so a part of how we have been and how things are, that we don't realize that these schemas are fueling those underlying assumptions, and they're like anchoring some of those automatic thoughts to kind of hold us captive and keep us from really being who we were designed to be, who we want to be. And I think our approach to parenting can like keep these things in mind so that we can like change the um, trajectory of our kids, and also like heal some of the things that we have experienced in our own lives. Mindful parenting is just this idea, the concept of approaching parenting from a perspective that we're going to give our children our attention and listen fully when we're interacting with them. And that's so challenging, right? I mean, we are probably wearing so many different hats, you know, all wives, mothers, workers, sisters, daughters. I mean, we have a lot going on. But to really take that time when we're interacting with our kids to give them that attention, um, fully attending to what they are wanting to share with us. And this is so important in the teen years. When I worked with the Long Beach Police Department and helping the families there, that's one of the things I heard so often from teens, just when they were wanting and desiring that connection with their parents, it was just hard to get their attention. Non-judgmental acceptance of yourself and your children. How hard is that? You know, there is a balance between accepting and loving who we are and where we are, and still wanting to move forward and achieve. It doesn't have to be mutually exclusive. We can love and accept ourselves as a work in progress, and our kids as well. And as a parent of two beautiful daughters, I have to admit, I am sometimes really frustrated with who they are as people. Like, oh my gosh, girls, come on. No, come on. I want to say that. And sometimes I definitely feel that way or think that way. But the importance of approaching our parenting, accepting who they are, not necessarily their behaviors all the time, but who they are as people. They're loving, gentle, inquisitive selves. And sometimes in that inquisitive nature, they want to try things that we don't always approve of, accept, or want for them. But it's important for them to learn that, and not for us just to tell them that. Being emotionally aware of what we need and what they need. Like, how are we in touch? How do we stay in touch with our feelings, our emotions, instead of putting them on this feeling is acceptable and this one isn't. You know, all feelings are information. And it tells us something about our experiences. It tells us something about, you know, what we're getting from those experiences. And it's so important not to judge those feelings, but to walk through them for ourselves so that we can teach our kids to walk through them as well. Self-regulation and parenting, just how are we with managing those emotions and understanding, exhibiting that self-control and self-awareness so that we can model that for our kids. And compassion for yourself, you know, approaching what you're going through with gentleness and respect and empathy. That's hard because we are always striving sometimes to be more. But we need to understand that we deserve our compassion as well. And when we can do that for ourselves, it's more likely that we can do that for our kids. If we approach our parenting in a mindful way, really, you know, doing our best to push out the noise, push out the challenges to us being in this place of peace, we can we can really shape the outcomes for our kids. You know, in a study um, conducted in 2009, it shows that this approach to parenting had amazing outcomes for kids. Um, just less incidents of substance abuse or challenges with the law. You know, that sense of well-being and confidence was demonstrated in the kids who had parents with who were interacting with that with this in mind. I wanted to have some time to really kind of get us in the mindset of approaching parenting from this kind of framework. And I want to invite everyone on the Zoom to kind of participate in this visualization exercise with me. One of the things we do know about mindfulness that it is effective in helping manage our own anxieties, our own frustrations, our own thoughts and insecurities, and really in the space to be more than what we think we can be. So I want to invite you to get comfortable. Sit back in your chair, put your feet flat on your floor, and I just want you to feel in this next few minutes just, you know, a sense of peace that I hope you can bring into your parenting. I want you to find your own rhythm. I'm going to give you some cues, but you know, whenever I do this, and when I do it for myself, you're like, oh, am I breathing right? I'm going to tell you right now, you're breathing just fine. You're doing it perfectly. So just as long as no one's passing out, good, you're good. So just find your own rhythm and then accept that your brain is going to wander. It's okay. As long as you're with me, you know, find your place in the story. I think you're going to be fine. So I want you to just pay attention to your breath, breathing in slowly through your nose and out through your mouth. Just find a sense of peace and calm as you breathe in slowly and out slowly. If you feel comfortable, I would invite you to close your eyes and just relax. Taking a deep breath in slowly and out. And I want you to see if you can just get comfortable with each breath. And if you can notice the air when it hits your nostril, feel that pressure, that slight pressure of the air just traveling up your nasal cavity. And exhale slowly and feel the air as it just passes gently through your lips. Just get more and more comfortable with the idea that you're exactly where you need to be and you're doing exactly what you need to do right now just by breathing. Just enjoy the peace that comes with each breath. And I want you to bring to mind your favorite beach. As you breathe in slowly and out slowly, I want you to feel the warmth of the sun on your face. I want you to feel the sand between your toes. I just want you to walk slowly down the beach, relaxed and comfortable as you breathe in, as you breathe out. And as you walk along the shore, I want you to just feel the peace. Hear the ocean lap against the shore. Put yourself right there. And as you walk, I want you to look down the strand. I want you to see your kids walking towards you. Not as they are today, but as they are as young adults. 19, 20 years old. Just hold it in your head. What kind of people are they? What things do you notice? What kind of people do you want them to be? I want you to hold that into your head. If you have older kids than that, I want you to see them as older adults in their 30s. What kind of people are they? What characteristics do they have? I want you to hold that in your heart, hold that in your head. I want you to think about that and meditate on that. What kind of world are they living in? I want you to bring your awareness back to each breath. And when you have a chance today, I want you to write down those characteristics that you saw in your children as adults. And as you bring your awareness back to your breath, I want you to just revisit that same beach. Feel the warmth again. Really be able to relax into each breath. And this time, as you see your kids walking towards you, I want you to envision their families, their children. What kind of parents are they? What kind of relationship do they have with their children? What kind of relationship do they have with their partners? What kind of relationship do they have with you? I want you to think about that. Hold that in your head. Hold that in your heart right now. And as you walk back to the shore, as you notice the sun on your face and your shoulders, think about what needs to happen today to help that be something realized for you, your children, and their children. Bring your awareness back to you being in your space, your feet on the floor, your back against your chair. And I invite you to open your eyes and be here. I hope that was great for you. I really hope that that is a part of setting the tone for today. I want just to give some final thoughts that, it is so important to find a healthy balance between keeping our eye on the future and staying present. And parenting with the end in mind, holding those things in your heart and in your head, the things you want for not only your children, but the next generation. And what we do today helps shape that. And remember that your personal example speaks louder than anything you'll ever say. We are going to be able to model peace and overcoming and perseverance and grit for our kids by how we live our life. And having compassion for yourself, understanding will help you to have compassion for your children. I am super excited about being here. I just want to thank so much Dr. Graham and the rest of the panelists. I am so honored, and I just thank you guys so much for allowing me to share today.
Hello, folks. Thank you so much for that, Julie. I really, I really got into it. You saw me yawning after, so I definitely got into it, and it's definitely connected to the work that I do with Parenting for Liberation. So I was really honored to be on this panel. Really appreciate Dr. Alcala and Dr. Graham for inviting me into the space and being back with CSUF and with this Institute of Intellectual Innovation. I'm going to be talking a little bit about the work of Parenting for Liberation and how it's connected to how it's framed around love and resistance as a parenting theory and praxis. And yeah, and folks, feel free to like be in the chat asking questions or, chiming in. I love to do things in ways that are interactive as much as possible, even in the Zoom world. Yeah. And so, because I said we're going to start with love and resistance, we got to start with the Lord herself, Audrey. And this quote grounds our work at Parenting for Liberation. The quote says, "Raising Black children in the mouth of a racist, sexist, suicidal dragon can be perilous and chancy. If they cannot love and resist, they probably will not survive." And so the work that we do is a practice of how do we cultivate within ourselves as parents, but also within our children, Black children who are being raised in this racist, sexist, suicidal dragon that is the United States of America. How can we support them in thriving? And how do we do that if we teach them the ability to both love and resist simultaneously? And so that's how we do the work, and that's how we frame the work. So how do we operationalize that at Parenting for Liberation specifically? So here's our theory of change, right? Our mission really is for Black parents to be doing the healing work that Julie just invited us into, right? For us to be connecting to ourselves, connecting to our source, healing from our trauma, healing from our past schemes, going deep, digging deep under those roots, as Julie mentioned, right? So that we can interrupt and heal from intergenerational violence, right? The violence that doesn't come from us as a people, but comes from our experience as Black people here in the United States, right? The violence that was perpetuated against us historically, right, through chattel slavery, but even ongoing to this day, right? Our people are still experiencing violence. So how can we heal from historical and ongoing trauma, interrupt intergenerational violence, and build resilient and joyful Black families in a community, right? So that's the mission of our work. And we do that across these three strategies, right? The first one being healing. And so I'm going to keep referencing you, Julie, as my healer of the day, right? That in order for us to show up whole for our children, we have to do our own healing work, right? We have to connect with the ways that we can access our whole selves and heal from any traumas or experiences so that we don't project any of that onto our children. And so the way that we do it at Parenting for Liberation is, we really try to connect with different ancestral ways of self-love, self-care, and healing, right? So I will talk a little bit about that in one of the slides, but it's really about not only doing traditional Western medicine ways of practicing healing, but also like returning to some ancestral practices, whether that be pouring libations, whether that be honoring our ancestors, right? Like, how do we connect with those healing modalities of our people? The second strategy is around learning, right? Learning and unlearning is how I like to frame it. In order for us to really think about how do we shift our parenting to be more liberated, to be more mindful, we have to learn new ways, new practices that maybe, that's not how our parents raised us, or that's not how their parents raised them. We can unlearn some of the unhealthy ways of parenting, and we can learn new practices. And I saw someone in the chat saying they wanted to learn, like, what are the different parenting approaches? And so I hope to introduce liberated parenting as an approach. And then our third piece is that, as a people, as Black people, we've always believed that African proverb that it takes a village to raise a child, right? We don't do this in isolation. Even the way that we define family is real expansive and broad. How many of y'all have play cousins, play uncles, play aunties, godmamas, granddaddy and them? All of those folks are a part of our village, right? And so the third prong is, how do we return to our village community, and build a community of folks who are loving up on Black babies, loving up on each other, right? And practicing our cultural ways of being. And also in that community building, when you bring community together, you have more power, right? When the people are united, there's more power. And so how do we utilize our community in service of liberation, right? And so that gets us to our long goal vision, is that we have a world where Black children are raised for liberation, right? And not from fear, not from violence, not from trauma, and by a community of Black parents, right? Not just my biological children are a part of this. I'm trying to parent with a collective and communal sense of parenting. And the ways that we embody that, our values and our ways of being, are through joy, radical joy, joy that will help us to continue thriving and loving and celebrating, even when things are hard or traumatic and violent, that we still find joy, right? And through connection to each other, to our people, to our ancestors, and through liberation. This fight for our freedom is so connected to the way that we're doing this work, and through the value of healing. And so that's those are the values that guide our work, right? So this is our theory of change, about like, how do we practice and operationalize Audre Lorde's quote around love and resistance. Yeah. I'm talking fast, so if I need to slow down, let me know. And so through that, right? So if we practice those values, what it leads us to is this concept that we've been cultivating and developing, or this theory and praxis around liberated parenting. And so I'll just name really quickly some of the other traditional parenting practices or styles for folks. I saw someone ask for that in the chat, right? So we have authoritarian, which is very disciplinarian. We have rules. It's my house, it's my rules. That's one. The second one is authoritative, which has rules, but really wants to support the child and like abiding by the rules in a way that has like consequences, but not punishment, right? So authoritative. And then we have lenient or permissive, which is like very much like children are going to be children, just let them do whatever they want, is how it's sometimes framed. And then the other one is attachment, right, which is really about that nurturing connection and attachment to children. That like, it kind of reminds me of what Dr. Julie was talking about with mindful parenting, right? And then there's all these other ones that have come up, right? There's conscious parenting, which really is about like us getting conscious about ourselves as parent. There's things in mainstream that we call, sometimes they call it helicopter parenting, where you're kind of like hovering around and don't want your child to have any boo-boos, any scrapes, like you're there to like jump in, and I often say, and in the book I talk about, it's different for Black parents who are raising Black children in helicopter environments. It's not the same as helicopter parenting, right? Because our children are under surveillance, and so we do have to be there and be present, because we don't know what this world is going to do to our babies, right? And there's another one called, I think it's called free range parenting. That's another like more recent one, which is like, you just let your children be free to roam and they'll come back home. Just give them the key. Back in the day, that used to be called a latchkey kid. I used to be one of those kids. You had a key to get home because you and your siblings, you made it happen because your parents may have multiple jobs or weren't available. And so just naming some of the parenting styles that are accessible in the mainstream. And then it's like, okay, but what about, none of these parenting practices or styles ever rooted it in the Black experience here, right? It never looked at, well, what is the impact of oppression? What's the impact of trauma? What's the impact of racialized violence? What's the impact of police violence, right? What's the impact of school pushout? Like, what is the impact of all these inequities and injustices in the way that Black parents may have to navigate raising our children from a place of protection, right? Wanting to keep our children safe. And so what liberated parenting does, it really acknowledges systems of oppression and white supremacy that are at play, right? So we don't say, you're a bad parent because you're doing X, Y, and Z. We try to contextualize, well, why are you making that choice? Why are you not letting your child play outside, right? Not that you're just a bad parent or something's wrong with you. We also center personal and collective healing. So even again, with the mindful parenting practice, like how do we center our healing? Because we have to first acknowledge that there is trauma, past and present. And then also a part of liberated parenting is this fight for justice and liberation is at the root of it. I just read this incredible book that I recommend called The Three Mothers, and it documents the mothers of Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, and James Baldwin. And it looks at how they, in their parenting, centered the fight for justice and liberation. And that's how you have a Malcolm X, a Martin Luther King, and a James Baldwin. It wasn't just by happenstance that they became these incredible leaders. It was because of their mothers, because of their parents, really, really centering that within their parenting style. And then other things that liberated parenting does, it reclaims ancestral wisdom. You know, so much we've been so intentionally disconnected, right? The lines of connection have literally tried to be severed, right, from the uprooting of Black people from the continent. And so, how do we return and reclaim our ancestral wisdom? How do we return and reclaim ancestral ways of being and practices of parenting in that village? And then the last thing that parenting, liberated parenting does is that it envisions Black futures. So often we're like, when we talk about Black history, we're looking at the past. And I really believe in Sankofa that we have to look to the past to know where we're going forward, but we have to be envisioning a Black future, a free Black future. We have to be envisioning, as Julie said, right, have the end in mind, but not just the end for my child, but for Black people, that there is a future that is liberatory and free. And even if I don't live it and see it, that I'm going to fight for it every day, right? Because I want to do this for my descendants, for 7 generations beyond me, right? And so these are some of the elements of liberated parenting. And so the way that we've done this work and how it's laid out in the book, Parenting for Liberation, is that it's in these three buckets, similar to our buckets around healing, learning and unlearning, and community. It's our reconnecting to ourselves, reconnecting and shifting our relationships to our children, and also reconnecting with community in a different way. And so I'm going to like pull some elements from the book as a way to kind of flesh out some of these. So in the section 1 of the book, it's about self. And so we really believe that the first step on the path to parenting for liberation is for us as parents to seize the opportunity to look at and be present, as Julie just invited us to be present through our deep self-reflection and self-awareness, right? And so that is the first part of the whole book, right? And shout out to Melisha Taylor, who I see in the audience or in the group, because she was interviewed for this book and her story is included in section 1 of the book, which is about looking at ourselves, right? Looking at our own childhood experiences and how that impacts us as a parent. And so the way that Parenting for Liberation does this self-work and self-reflection work is through caring for ourselves, right? So we're back at the Lord is here again to let us know that caring for ourselves is not self-indulgence, it is self-preservation, and that is an act of political warfare. Yes, and so we have to take care of ourselves. Full stop, period. That's it. There's no other justification. If we don't take care of ourselves, if we don't heal ourselves, if we don't take that time for ourselves, we can't be present to our children. It's impossible, right? And so some people would say it's selfish, but as Audre Lorde said, it's not selfish and it's not self-indulgent, right? It's necessary for our survival. And doing that, literally taking the time to rest, is an act of political warfare, because Black people were not brought to this country to rest. We were brought to this country to labor. We were brought to this country to work. Yes. And so our choosing to say, I'm not going to work today, I'm taking a day off. Us choosing to say, we were also not brought here to raise our own children, right? That's not what we were brought here to do. We were brought here to breed children and then to be sold from us and to have our children work. And we were brought here to take care of other people's children. And so just choosing to pause and say, today I'm going to spend a day with my children at the beach, that is an act of resistance. That is an act of liberation. That is an act of political warfare, right? And so when I say this is resistance, resistance is not only being at the protests, at the march. Literally, the way that you choose to raise your children is a form of resistance, because our children were not meant to survive, and our children were not meant to be here in that way. And so us living and loving and supporting them is literally an act of resistance, yeah? And so caring for yourself is also an act of resistance. And so the ways that we've done that is we have created this Care for Caregivers Fund, right? And so we asked the question, we called the question, who cares for the caregivers? And in this moment where essential workers are all the care workers, right? Those who nurture, those who take care, those who nurse, those who feed, those who drive. Those essential workers are folks who are nurturing, who are providing care. The teachers who are still working, right? Those are the folks who provide care. So we asked the question, who cares for those who care for so many? And so we created this fund where caregivers could say, actually, I want resources to take care of myself. So we created a fund where Black parents could access and get connected with different Black healing practitioners, right? And so this is about, how do you take time to care for yourself? Maybe it's therapy, maybe it's Reiki, maybe it's somatics. Maybe it's you want to practice like connecting to your voice through song or through sound healing and sound medicine. Maybe you want to practice with singing bowls, right? Like we offered so many different creative and ancestral ways of practicing healing with different Black healing practitioners. And so parents were able to match up one-on-one. It's like, pick which healing medicine you want and we'll match you with the person and we'll pay for it. And so we did that because we wanted to make sure that parents had access not only to care, but actually could be connected with a Black healing practitioner, which is it's not as available, right? I think there's some data that says like, I can't do statistics, but basically there's not a lot of access to Black healing practitioners. We also do things like bringing folks together. Like we had this event called Black Mama Magic, where we brought mothers together to practice healing themselves through creating like body scrubs and face scrubs, and really like in community with each other, like giving each other like hand scrubs and anointing each other's hands and speaking life over each other and speaking life into their parenting, to themselves and to their children. And so it is about connecting with ourselves and accessing our own healing in our capacity. And so when we do that, we can be better parents, and then we can connect to our children, which is the second part of the book. And it says the second step on the path to parenting for liberation is to show up in right relationship with our children by holding their humanity, their feelings, and their experiences at the center of our parenting. And it's really like, how can our parenting be child focused? Right? Like parenting is so, like, even the word parenting is parent centric, right? But how could it be? It should be like children. I don't know what the word would be, but how do we have our children's needs, desires, experiences, heart, humanity, feelings at the center of our choices when we're parenting? And so that's the second part of the book. Once you begin to actually reflect on yourself, it's like, okay, now how can I make this accessible to my children? How can I make this care accessible to my children? And so some of the ways that we've done that is we really try to, when we do bring children together, we want them to also be thinking about, what does liberation mean to me? I'm only 5. What is this word? What are you talking about? Right? And so we have this gathering where we ask them if they could be superheroes, and if they wanted superpowers, what would they be? Right? And so in that, it's like that and then we introduce them or reintroduce some of them to many everyday heroes that they might not know about who were kids. We introduce them to Ruby Bridges, right? We introduce them to different Black people who are leaders that might be in their own community, that might be historical, that they can connect to and see themselves in, because that is what liberation looks like, when they can see themselves reflected in some powerful beings. And we ask them, what are their superpowers? And so I'll give you an example, because this is when it becomes like your children will speak and manifest what they need if we just listen. So my son, at the time of this gathering, oh my gosh, he might have been 6 or 7. And he said his superpower that he wanted to have was to teleport. And in my mind, I said, oh, he wants to move more freely. He wants more freedom. He wants to be able to travel. He wants to be able to go. And he wants to just do that like that. He just wants to go. He doesn't want me saying, no, you can't go here. Stop. Well, I have to be there with you. I have to be there to watch you, right? He wanted more freedom to move. And so what we did when we asked the parents, whenever their children said what their superpower would be or what they wanted their magic to be, we wanted the parents to be like, what can the parent do to manifest that, to make that possible, to cultivate that in their home? And so at that time, I was not allowing my son to go outside and play by himself. And so when he said he wanted to teleport, I said, okay, you want to go outside and play. So then we had to create new practices in our home, right? How can I operationalize his superpower? How could I help cultivate that, right? And deal with my own fear. and sit somewhere and deal with my own worry and do that work of being like, okay, this is my trauma response. This is not his trauma response. He wants to be free. And so just that's the work that we're doing. And the way that we're doing this, connecting to children and learning and unlearning, is through, we have the book with lots of stories. I interview and talk to so many parents because I always say, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm learning. I love to learn from other parents. And so that's also a lot of the story sharing and learning that comes through the podcast. So if you're interested in podcasts and hearing stories about how parents are shifting from their fear and their trauma towards liberation in their parenting, you can check out the podcast as a way to just get more insights. And then the third section of the book and of the work is around building community. And here it says, as parents, we also need support, which can come when we reach out and connect to community. As parents for liberation, right? It's really important for us to connect to the broader movement for Black liberation, because our children's liberation extends beyond the home. And so when we think about bringing Black parents together, I really believe that Black parents are a super power source, right? When you think about Black parents' relationship to schools, Black parents' relationships in community at churches or in parks and rec, right? Like that Black parents can be activated in all these spaces. What would be possible if Black parents had seats at all of those tables? What would be possible if Black parents ran the school, the PTA, or ran the school? What if Black parents, what would be possible if Black parents were activated? Because all of our children are going to these places, right? And our children may be experiencing trauma or push out or things of that nature. And what can be possible if we activated as a unit, right, as a political power source, to interrupt any inequity? And so I really believe that Black parents should be at the center of liberation movements, just like I said, the mothers of Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, and James Baldwin, right, that they cultivated these children who were the leaders that we remember, but we don't remember their parents' names, right? So I'm going to say their names: Alberta King, Louise Little, and Bernice Baldwin, right? We need to say these mothers' names, because these young people, these adults who we say they're the heroes of the Black movement, they wouldn't be here without the parents who were actually cultivating liberation on a daily basis in their homes. And so I really believe that Black parents are a huge power source, and we just need to activate that power amongst ourselves and with our families. And then that is how we can get to liberation, right? And I'm thinking about this, especially when we think about Black Lives Matter, and we often think about the parents only as those who have lost their children. But Black Lives Matter while their children are alive. Black Lives Matter in this moment. And so Black parents are active leaders in those spaces. A lot of the leaders in those spaces are Black mamas and Black dads. And so we really got to think about the ways that that is a connection to liberation in our home is not enough, because we send our children out into the world, so we have to fight for their liberation wherever they're going to be. If that's at the school, if that's driving down the street in their car, if that's at the park, right? We have to get active, I believe. That's the theory. You don't have to do it. It's just the theory. Right? And so these are the three pillars of the theory. And so the ways that we do community, I want to say that community is not only about resistance, but it's also about love, right? Love and resistance. So this was our Kwanzaa event, because it's also about how do we cultivate spaces that Black people experience joy and pleasure and fun and celebration, that Black children get to see themselves and dance and pour libations and play drums, right? And connect with our ancestral practices of community. And so it's also about how do we cultivate love and resistance simultaneously. Having this event and bringing 100 Black families together is also a form of resistance, while also a form of love. Yeah. Okay. And as I close, I want to invite all of you to our upcoming Black Mama Magic event. It's taking place in Compton, California, so not in Orange County, but it's not that far of a drive. If you have a phone, you can click or do something with the camera, and the QR code will pop up more information. But this social distance version will be a drive-up event. We're going to be giving away healing kits again, healing is at the center of all this. It's going to be a box full of things, over like $100 worth of products. We're giving them away for free. There's going to be sage and Palo Santo and candles and incense and hand sanitizer and a face mask and a journal and a coloring book around self-care. It's going to be so many things, but it's really centered in how can we practice healing and taking care of ourselves as parents? How do we honor Black mamas? How do they have access to their magic? The way that we get access to our magic is to take a break. to take time to take care of ourselves. That's how we cultivate our magic. And with that, I'm going to just end here with here's all of the ways that you can connect to the work, our website, podcast, and you can order a copy of the book. And I realized there were so many things in the chat that I did not see, but I'm going to stop sharing and pass to the next presenter. Thank y'all for your time.
Thank you so much, y'all. So amazing. I feel so inspired. Thank you, Julie. Thank you, Trina. And I was thinking about my own sons. I always talk about my sons. I spell it S-U-N-S because I always say they are Black boys shining. So I'm going to read some of my poetry, but I was thinking about the line that Julie said, asked us, what kind of world do I want them to inherit? So I think some of my poems sort of address that, think about that. So I'm going to share it now. We beautiful Black boys. This is written after We Real Cool by Gwendolyn Brooks. We beautiful Black boys. We got so much poise. We look like grown men. We keep coming to an early end. We got mamas who keep mourning. We just want to see a new morning. We smart and get good grades. We keep getting so much shade. We rise early and study hard. We still got cops asking for ID cards. We wear hoodies and travel with friends. We tired of being seen through same old lens. We want history to stop rewinding, repeating. We don't want to be a part of senseless beatings. We need our brilliance to be widespread. We got no choice but to keep moving ahead. This next poem, I wrote a lot of poetry during the pandemic. I'm part of a writing group, and a lot of us are mamas. Thank y'all. And so this one was actually published in a journal called Raising Mamas, which publishes Black and brown mamas, marginalized mamas. Tender, a Black boy song. And this is from my sons, Jordan and Nicholas. My two sons, and I spell it S-U-N-S, are light and joy and Black brilliance. Sometimes my youngest son is all teen talk back. My oldest, all queer young adult swag. Together, they be Black boy magic. My sons be Black boy magic. They quote Baldwin and Lord, how they still shine in America. Even when they argue, they have each other's backs. In our house, boys can cry or dye their hair a color of the rainbow. Our home is a rainbow. Our boys are a house filled with love. Our teen asked his big brother how to shave his newly grown pandemic beard. Last night, his big brother surprised him with his first beard trimmer set. Lovingly showed his younger brother how to shave for the very first time. First to wet his face, then spread shaving cream and gently guide the blade without cutting himself. They root for each other like nobody's business. They've been marching together for pride and Black lives since they could walk. Our oldest son has no patience for his two mamas and our questions. But this past semester, during a pandemic, let his little brother talk to him for hours on end by video chat about nothing and everything for at least once a week while sheltering in 3,000 miles away on his California campus. Some days, my mama heart bursts or breaks for Black boys. What I'm trying to say is every Black boy is my son. All sons are Black boys shining. And this next one is called I Still Can't Breathe, a ghazal for America. Every day, folks risk their lives marching for freedom. Rage makes us forget our biggest fears. American cities have sheltered in for months and folks hide behind masks while a pandemic exposes secret fears. In our home, my family speaks their names and honors their legacy. Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, George Floyd, we can never imagine your final fears. Last night, I dreamt my two sons finally lived in a safe world and smiled. I woke remembering my babies remain target, tried to exhale these mama fears. Our family has had Black boy in America conversations with our sons since they were 6 or 7. Did learning about Trayvon Martin at such a young age teach them how to fear? My heart grows heavy, yet I hold on to legacy of my family marching for freedom. Juliet, keep your voice raised and your head held high. Forget all this talk of fear. Ethery for Black bodies in motion. I cried today, thinking about George Floyd. In my dream, everything was triggered. My son standing in the door frame, my son screaming out, "Mama." I think I was a ghost reaching out for him. We kept falling. No one would help us land. tanka lullabies for Black boys. We try to make sense of why they kill our children. Some seems Black means attack, but we know Black boys are stars, all that potential to shine. Mamas, we see joy at sight of every Black boy. We need them to breathe, try to picture them alive, far into the future. Shine, shine, Black boys, shine on, shine brighter than any star. We pray you go far. Our lullabies, our prayers, magic whispers while you sleep. And I'm just gonna read two more. This one is called Ethery for My Sons in America. And this was published in a motherhood anthology earlier this year. No joke, raising Black sons in this country, no matter how bright they shine, they Black. Sometimes their Blackness closes doors or screams, no justice, no peace, no racist police. I rock them to sleep. Their Black night sky filled with stars, shining suns. Sons can hear me humming them lullabies in their dreams. I think I can hear them chanting, Mama, please stop worrying. They don't know. When they are so still, I still lean in close, listen for breath, whisper, sons, your Black is so beautiful. And this last poem is a very new poem I just wrote maybe about a week ago. And of course, thinking about my sons. In this house, we raise our voices. We are raising up Black boys in this house. In this house, some days our voices stay raised high. Other nights, we are soft whispers. Black boys are becoming Black men in this house. In this house, Black boys blossom, Black boys bloom, Black boys cry or laugh, Black boys be brilliant in this house. This is a Black boys' house filled with love. We don't let fear into this house. We know fear intimately, but we don't let it enter these doors. This is a safe house for Black boys becoming Black men. This is a safe house for Black men who were once Black boys. This is our house, and these are our sons. Thank you all.
Wow, thank you, JP.
Sure, thank you. Thank you so much.
We do have some time, so I'm just gonna invite everyone to come back. I know that there's so much. I'm getting teary-eyed. I'm like, oh gosh, I'm gonna make it. But I'm just so grateful for all of the different voices. Like, it's so powerful to hear the way that they weave together and hear all of your voices together, really in concert for the same goal, the goal of freedom and love and hope and future for Black people and Black children. And that is so inspiring to me and encouraging to me. I had a couple of questions, and we might not get a chance to answer both of them, but I know you're all coming from different places. And I also invite you, Dr. Alcala, to join in too. Dr. Alcala is teaching Black psychology, or teaching a class on psychology, right? And so trying to help raise the, train the next generation of teachers and counselors. And so what does it mean to, like, what shifts when you think of wherever you're coming from, or whatever your view is, what shifts do you think need to happen in approaches to Black mental health and parenting? So either from a mental health perspective, a counseling perspective, a psychology perspective, or a parenting perspective, what are the things that you see still, like, that trouble you, that you want to see kind of dismantled or changed, or even just a new view of moving forward? What change do you feel like you want to see change?
Dr. Graham, I'll just say I want to thank everyone in the panel. I think about my son too, and I appreciate the poems, the mindful parenting practices shared by Julie, and the work that Trina does, and admire the work that she's doing, and she does it with passion and compassion, and I'm a big supporter of her work. From a psychological perspective, I always encourage my students. I was frustrated with seeing psychology books and only mentioning children of color when it's a problem, right? When it's from a deficit perspective. And so trying to bring different perspectives, seeing our children of color from a strengths perspective, right? The things that they do well, all the the magic that they have. So I encourage all students present here, whether you're a parent or not a parent, to question the models, to question the theories that don't take into account the context, right? the lived experiences of people of color, in this case of, Black parents and Black children, and to continue to question that. Because if we never question those, we just take them as truths. And there were truths at some point, but the parenting theory, 1996, based on the experiences of white middle class families that don't have to deal with racism, that don't have to deal with the oppressive systems. And so it doesn't work for other parents. It doesn't take into account, colonialism, imperialism, slavery, etc. So really, I encourage students to question that and to take all this knowledge from today. And it's intellectual knowledge, it's emotional knowledge, and it's also a lived experience that we share today, and to do something with it. So thank you all.
I would love to add something. One of the things I really appreciated in hearing Trina's work is the emphasis on community. And, that is something that I think getting back to can kind of normalize some of the things that come up as parents. Like when you're in your silo, parenting, doing the best that you can often feel insecure. But in community, you can get that normalization of what you're going through, and talking about the challenges, the overcomings, the joys, the sadness in a community that is supportive and understanding. And I think that is something that would love to see develop more, and a normalization of reaching out for help, and this idea of interdependency, that we need each other, that we're not meant to do this by ourselves. And oftentimes reaching out for counseling is taboo. The idea of reaching out for help, counseling help, what people think about counseling, really changing that from a community level and being a resource for people to access. I know that was one of the things that inspired me to become a counselor, seeing my single mom, divorced, 6 kids, raising her children on her own. And she could have used community, someone to talk to, someone to really normalize the struggle that she was experiencing. And in our community, that wasn't a resource. She didn't have that, and definitely want to be that going forward. So I think I really appreciated seeing that in Trina's presentation, and I think that is awesome.
And there's another question we have about 5 more minutes. One of the things that I also see a lot in sort of, we're talking about Black parenting and even child development. Let's see, Dr. Alcala brought up this idea of this deficit model, which is not just a model that you see in psychology. You see it in education, you see it in in financial planning. Like, it really is a norm for how we think about people of color. We think from the position of deficits. And so when we're talking about, clearing, one of the things that Trina mentioned was learning and unlearning, right? And so this idea of like unlearning, negative images or negative sort of habits or ways of being. What do you think are some of the most enduring or damaging images of Black parents or childhood development in general, when you think of like childhood development or psychology? What are some of those like more enduring or damaging images of Black parents or childhood development that we need to like unlearn?
I'm not a psychologist. So I'm like, I don't know if you're asking the PhDs or the doctors. But from my experience in the work, I think the idea that the Black family is broken, right? is one of the deficits, right? That we have, because we have single mother households, that is automatically a deficit, or that there's something wrong. When CDC data shows that even if a Black father is not in the home with his children, that he is the most active parent beyond any other father, right? The most active father, more than any other father, according to the CDC data, right? That even if they don't live in the same household, even if they're separated and are not cohabitating, that Black fathers are more active than any other father in their children's lives. And so I think some of those are some of the narratives that are damaging. I think this idea of the welfare queen, right? This idea that was framed by the Reagan era, and also prior to that, this idea that Black mothers are utilizing their children for resources, right? That we don't have the same love and care and concern for our children. I think those are some of the damaging narratives around Black parents. And then the last thing I would say is like just the over criminalization of Black parents, for things that other parents do, right? Like trying to get our kids in good schools, trying to get a job, and like leaving our children home so that we can go apply for, like those types of things that people do, that we get criminalized and policed for the same behaviors. Yeah, those are a couple that come to mind, but there's a lot of problematic ways that Black parents are demonized and discredited.
I'd like to add one more thing. I appreciate Julie's work in the training, in the parenting workshops that you mentioned at the beginning. I think that's a very different approach than what I've seen with other parenting interventions that come from a place of we need to fix this. I'm like, parents of color, Black parents don't know how to parent their children. They're doing it wrong. And so again, coming from this deficit perspective and having a different approach that acknowledges them and that sees them as capable, obviously, but providing resources like in the way that Trina is doing with the care for caregivers, as an example.
And I would love to add, one of the things that I see in my work as an individual therapist is that sense of, and it could be a myth of the absence of those parents. And there's so many ways that we can think about it differently. Like I said before, it's not the experience, but how we think about that experience that really sets the tone with what we're going to do with that. And this idea that Black parents aren't available either emotionally or physically for whatever reason is something that I think we can approach differently to help kids make sense out of it, so that it undermines that potential of feeling abandoned. Like, how do we talk about mom needs to go here so that we can, so I'm working for our future? Or how do we explain that a family isn't just mom, dad, and child, but a family is what we make it? How we frame that, I think, can really set the tone to undermine the development of those negative core beliefs about ourselves and about the world that our kids are going to face.
Thank you all so much. So we're reaching the end of our time. I know we could talk for another hour. I can't wait to continue conversation. One of the things that I truly believe about this institute is that it's just the beginning. This conversation is just beginning. I look forward to more. I look forward to, going on I'm going to look up the drive-by and get some Black Mama magic. I invite you all to be part of this conversation. We do want to continue this. So ask questions, email me, email the folks on the panel. We'll be posting more information about them on our social media in the future. And so we're so excited to continue this conversation. We will be starting our next panel. It'll be a poetry reading and workshop featuring our LA Poet Laureate and 3 new rising poets in about 15 minutes. So please, get a drink, get a break, get a sandwich, and come back and write some with us. Thank you so much.